Welcome to Adventures in Solitaire. Today we'll be discussing Fabled Lands. So welcome to an Adventures in Solitaire review of Fabled Lands. Fabled Lands has a special place on my shelf in my home. It's an open world game book and it's an interactive novel series, also known as, a game book. It is written by Jamie Thompson and Dave Morris. So I think it's important to maybe talk a little bit about what exactly is an open world game book. If you've already watched my review of Legendary Kingdoms, The Valley of Bones, then you kind of already know what that is, but we'll assume that you haven't, and it probably doesn't hurt to talk about it a little bit more anyway. So each book in this series represents a kingdom or a region of land. This book in particular, being the first book in the series, is the war-torn kingdoms in an area of Sokara. As you can see this map, it's absolutely humongous, and it's just encompassing this area of the world. And as stated, every book will tend to cover a certain area of this world map. This creates an open world for you to explore. So Fabled Lands was the first game book series, at least to my recollection, that truly had an open world. It also was the first in any series that I'd seen where your choices were remembered. Now, I had played the only one that I was aware of that did this, that remembered like when you read one book and then you went to the next, was Lone Wolf. In Lone Wolf, though even there, it really didn't remember your choices as much as the story that came, but it would still remember like what skills you chose, what equipment you had, and if you happen to have gone somewhere in the book and got a piece of equipment in an earlier book, it could help you in a later one. So that's kind of how it would remember some of those choices. In that, if you hadn't made the choice to go to this place and do this thing with this monster or this person, you wouldn't have got that item, and therefore you wouldn't have been able to do something else later in another book. But even that was minimal. When Fabled Lands came around, it took not only that to the next level, but it said, "Hey, listen, let's make this book an entire like country or continent or region, and let's let them not just travel in a linear direction." Let's let them go back to cities they've been before. Let's let them go from one end of the map to the other in the book's map, and then go back. Let's let them go to the edge of the map and then have a page that tells them to go to another book and what page to go to in that other book. And you literally will get that other book, you'll bring it on over, and you'll open to that page and you'll continue on your trek there, on your adventure. Now, and then it didn't stop there. That if I made certain choices in this book, they could affect things in another book. They could affect how people, dealt with you. When you come back and you go to a city that you helped change the leadership in, that whole city changes for you for here on into forever. You could side with what you think is the good guy, or what you or go against what you think is the bad guy. You have complete control over your choices, and they do have consequences for better or for worse. It was the first time I had seen this done. It was amazing, and it still to this day is an amazing game series. So of course we've heard a little bit of that with my other review with Legendary Kingdoms. But so I kind of want to talk a little bit about the gameplay or the rules for the book. Fabled Lands uses a set of attributes, including health. It uses two sets of six-sided dice to determine the outcome of actions during combat. Your attribute value is added to the is added to your final roll. So if you roll two six-sided dice, you get an 8, and your attribute value is a 4. Then you're going to have a 12 for your total for your roll. And of course, you're going to be trying to hit some sort of number that they want you to aim for. So they'll tell you to make a magic roll and that you need to have an 8 or above, for example. Characters can level up to level 10. It looks like that's the cap here, and each level that you have will add like an addition to your combat rolls there. Character levels aren't gained through like getting experience points, but rather by completing special tasks. You can also have your character increase individual attributes separately aside from their level by also doing certain tasks in the game or completing certain things. The game keeps track of things in a couple of different ways. It keeps track of things through checkboxes. You'll find these scattered throughout the entire book. And you'll also find them, you'll keep track of things through a code word system. And every book has its own set of code words. And the way the code words work is that if you go and do something, you might get the code word of ashen. And then sometime later on in the book, you'll read a phrase will say, if you have the code word ashen, don't read any further, turn to this page. Because you did something, it's going to affect what happens there. So that's really nice. Not a lot of books that do have code words have a dual system where it's not just the code words, it's also check boxes throughout the book. The only caveat there being that obviously you're either going to have to keep track of the paragraph number that you're on and a checkbox and keep it separate, or you're going to have to write in the book itself for those check boxes that are in the book. It allows the book to truly cater itself to the decisions that you made in a really grand way. Your characters will be able to, or your character, I should say, not characters. Your character will be able to go and buy items in the book. There's lots of different items. That you can purchase from town to town. Prices will change for those items from town to town. You may find yourself willing to traverse a great distance just so you can get that deal from that blacksmith who makes those really awesome swords at a great price. You'll have magical items that can help you out. That sometimes can be purchased, other times they must be found, and there's no other way to gain them. Um, and that kind of also can give a sense of importance to those items because you can lose items in this game. So you could get yourself like what you would see as the most powerful weapon or spell, or not spell, but weapon or item in the game, and then end up losing it sometime later. So you really feel this need to kind of be careful with what you do beyond your own life. You'll also be able to sell most of those items back to shops as well. Again, prices can kind of change there. In addition to selling, you can also trade goods from one area of the land to another. And just a moment ago, I talked a little bit about losing your equipment. You can buy property where you can store your equipment, but even even that property, like you can have stuff stolen from your property. So, and there's things you have to be careful of there. And then you can also go to temples where if you're afraid death might be a problem, obviously that would be an issue. The game's over. You can go to a temple and buy kind of like insurance, if you will, like death insurance. And if you happen to die, you can be brought back. On the concept of death, one of the problems I have had with game books, and this also included, I think even Lone Wolf, is that some of them would allow you to make a choice that seemed reasonable, but on the next page you turn to that you just die. And there didn't really seem to be any real like heads up. This book does okay with preventing that from happening, but it does allow that to happen, and that I don't like about it. To the point that sometimes I feel like I want to almost add a little bit of a house rule to save me from that type of a situation. And it's up to you as to whether you'd want to do that, of course. But I know that the author doesn't have a problem with that. There's been people who kind of broached that with him, and most authors will be that way with their content. But it does have a few instances where you can go too far, and it doesn't matter how skilled you are. If you made that choice, that's it. But there aren't many instances like that. And in all honesty, I mean, it's not a big deal for me to say I'm just going to use my death certificate, or not death certificate, death insurance, if you will, on that, and just roll it back. I did pay for that insurance after all. So let's talk a little bit about how it reads. The book's kind of light on the text. It's kind of more akin to some of the older game books. So it's not like when I think about like other game books, like say Destiny Quest or the Legendary Kingdoms that I recently reviewed. Those are pretty well written, especially with the Legendary Kingdoms. Those are very, very well written with a lot of flavor, where they're paying a lot of attention to your sensory experience, your visual, your audio, your smells, um, and the feelings of the characters and what's going on there. They do they go a little bit more in depth than this does, and that may not be a bad thing. You may just kind of want to get a general idea, and if that's the case, this fits, and it fits for me either way because I still have a wonderful experience with this book every time I go back to it, or these books, I should say. The artwork in the book is to for me it's fantastic because it just really reminds me of that old school artwork, and that also it's not a bad thing. The artwork is I wouldn't even say it's serviceable. I'd say it's beyond serviceable. I think it does its job, and it has a reasonable amount of artwork throughout. A single book in Fable Lands can vary because some of those books are a little bit longer than others, especially the last one in the series. It's the seventh book. Um, but they can take somewhere around like a few hours to complete. But you can also make a single book last you as long as you want because you can play the game as long as you want. You can be a hero in that land for as long as you want. Now, there will be a little bit of diminishing returns because you can end up in a situation where you've kind of done everything, and either you've been locked out because of choices you made, which is not a bad thing because it makes you want to go back and start again, or you can have a situation where it's just like you're left with just random encounters and trying to trigger random encounters, or maybe you want to trade. I guess you could do that too. You could go back and trade and kind of go through and do that bit there. But despite the fact that you have a few hours or more in a single book, you have seven books, seven kingdoms to go through, and you'll absolutely have reasons to want to go back between the books, back and forth from here to there, that one to this one, this one to that one, just to kind of revisit places that either you couldn't deal with before, see what's changed, or see what kind of an impact you may have now. So I could see this series easily taking a month of of really focused gaming to complete. Or well, you're not going to complete it because there's going to be stuff locked out, but because of choices, but or even more if you wanted. It is a huge open world land for you to explore. As I stated before, there are only seven books in the series. They had intended to make, I forget what the count was, but they had intended to make a few more to have every area of that map mapped out. To my understanding, the author didn't have any definite plans to continue the series after the seventh book. Right now, he's working on an electronic translation of the series to early access on Steam, and that's actually available now. It looks like it's a pretty good translation. It's definitely made some changes, like to combat, for example, and it looks pretty good. I haven't got a copy of it yet, but it looks like it's pretty good there. But they've kind of hinted that they may be willing to go back. But I know the author had said that around the time that he was writing it was about the time that computers were really starting to take off and electronic gaming was taking off, and he almost kind of felt like it was better served in that format. I would carefully disagree with that. I tend to like something in my hands, and I don't think anything can ever replace that. No matter how much easier it makes that process, I still would want to have this in my hands. I would still want that alternative. In fact, I may even actually prefer it. So hopefully he'll continue with the series and just finish this out. I definitely, for me, would be just one of the major accomplishments in interactive fiction that I've ever seen. Right there, along side or right around Legendary Kingdoms with what they're trying to do. So, to kind of close up here, Fable Lands, it absolutely altered my perception of what it means to have or read a game book. It will, as stated before, it'll absolutely forever remain in my collection, and it'll continue to remain by my side, whether I'm at work or I'm at play. It'll always be there. Great series, highly recommend it. This is one of those that like Legendary Kingdoms, if you're even remotely interested in fantasy and role playing, I think you'd be doing yourself a great disservice not to at least pick up the first book and just give it a shot. I can't see how you wouldn't walk away having a little bit of fun with it and feeling like you'd gotten at least your money's worth out of it, if not much, much more. Thank you.